So my name is Deanna Djos, and I go by the pronouns she and her. And today we are presenting at Shared Learning Forum. I hope you see my PowerPoint here, but empowering your sex esteem by exploring the language related to sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And we're doing this in celebration of Pride Month, which is wrapping up this weekend. So if you're interested in looking at the virtual parade and looking at what goes on in terms of the celebrations, you can go on pridetoronto.ca, I believe, or 519. It's all linked up there, and you'll see lots of things going on. Just for you guys who don't know what Shared Learning Forum is, once a month, we host a presentation or presenter for free virtually to the sector on resources, information that people love and want to learn more about. So if you have topics that you're really interested in, want to hear more about, please share that with us in the chat. We'll follow up. We're always looking for great ideas on presentations. Myself and a small mighty team, Jason Maher, who's going to be filming, just so you guys know where he's from Connectability. We film all of our presentations and we upload them Connectability. So as soon as those links are ready, we're happy to share that with you. And Zoe, she's also on here with a lovely pride flag behind. The three of us do the Shared Learning Forum and put this all together. We usually sit in a room live, but since COVID, we do this virtually. What I want to just let you know is that we're doing the presentation for an hour. If you guys need to get your own refreshments, do so. You know where your washrooms are. So we're just going to get started, and we hope that you enjoy. We will answer questions at the end if you have some, and know that you can email us or reach out to us anytime after the fact.
And I'll also,
go ahead.
Yet again, I'm the main host, and for those of you that forget my name already, it's Gabe.
And I will be monitoring. If you have any questions during the presentation, I'll be looking at the chat box and monitoring that.
Excellent. So we're going to get right into it. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So I'm just going to close up so I don't see all of you, although it's lovely.
Empowering your sex esteem by exploring the language related to sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression.
All right. So we're going to introduce our hostess with the mostest.
Well, I'll introduce you first. This is Deanna Djos, who is a sexual health promoter for the relationship group in Toronto. She's spent over a decade teaching the importance of empowering sex esteem by ensuring everyone understands the value of self-awareness, love, and celebrating their sexuality. Deanna provides the tools and resources to ensure that everyone has the power to prevent abuse, advocate with assertiveness, while ensuring that everyone is aware of domestic human trafficking in Ontario. Deanna believes that knowledge is power and access to sex education is a basic human right, and she is passionately teaching for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities within Toronto and across the province. And I'm very, very honored to be teaching with Deanna for what seems like the 1,000th time, but I love each and every time. So welcome, Deanna.
Awesome. So I'm going to introduce my co-host, Michelle Anbar-Goldstein. MSW, RSW, social worker, advocate, educator. Michelle works at CAMH, providing support to people with IDD within the forensic mental health system. She's also a faculty member for the Developmental Services Worker Program at Humber College and an instructor for Living Works Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Prior to working in mental health, Michelle worked in the developmental services sector for over a decade. Michelle has a passion for prevention of abuse, criminalization, exploitation of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities through the facilitation of workshops, groups, and educational initiatives. And our other co-host and great facilitator is Gabe Wertman-Parris, self-advocate, son, brother, friend, athlete, musician, and a huge Raptor and Leafs fan.
Hey, what up, babes?
Gabe believes that all lives matter. Gabe is supported at Montage in his own apartment in Toronto. He is proud of his independence and difference he makes in his community every single day. So that's us.
I'll be the first to say this, but I'm nervous about saying this. I'm by myself.
Bisexual. Thank you, Gabe, for sharing that with us today. So go ahead.
One brief thing, sort of a PSA for my audio. I have a young son who's in the same room as me watching YouTube videos and whatnot. So if I'm muted or if you hear some feedback, just let me know. I will mute my audio.
Carry on, my boy.
So I just want to really quickly just send a shout out in regards to this is a presentation done by the relationship group, members of the relationship group.
Okay.
And this is who we are. Gabe, you want to read it?
Purpose: to identify effective
Practices that support
practices that support proactive, productive relationship building across one's
entire life.
entire life. To recommend and create physical tools that will support the identified practices in order to influence positive change, to work collaboratively and respect the expertise of people's lived experience.
We're just going to read this part, Gabe. So the relationship group, if you want to learn more, is under Montage Support Services. We have a link there. And we are a membership of self-advocates, community, agency staff. And we're just here to let you know that we're presenting under their banner and Montage's banner today. So we're really excited to present. We'll get right into it. Okay, so today we're learning about sexual identity, orientation. Perfect. Gabe, hit it.
First impressions of LGBTQ plus people. When's the first time you can remember learning that some people are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer? Where did most of the influence of your initial impressions, understanding of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer people come from, e.g., family, friends, television, books, news, church? And number 3, how have your impressions, understanding of LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer questioning people changed or evolved throughout your life?
So these are 3 questions we're asking you now. We'd love to just hear in your chat, write in your chat is, when's the first time you can remember learning about some people are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer?
Mine was from books and TV and magazines.
Okay.
Also, for those of you who don't want to write in the chat, feel free to just unmute yourselves and speak to the rest of the group.
Yeah, we got a few minutes where we're just going to share want to hear some of your thoughts before we get into it.
I'm interested in whatever anybody has to say.
So we have some people here in the chat saying high school friend, public school, an uncle, so a family member, as a child, family, friends, family, a neighbor. So a lot of folks sort of having this experiences with people in their community, which actually is not super common when we ask this question. So we have school, family, friends, cousins, a neighbor. Very interesting. Family in elementary school. Self. Okay. TV.
Amazing. You know, it's TV was really influential for me. Three's Company. I never understood why he was allowed to live with the 2 girls and why the limp wrist sort of, all the pieces that went there. I had tons of questions when I watched the show because I was so confused, but that was one of the shows that actually made me realize and sort of thought more about that, the subtleties of those shows.
I always, sorry
yeah.
to cut you off, but I was always taken aback. I couldn't understand how I felt about my sexuality wasn't represented on screen. It was something that was really hard for me growing up as a youth until I've, figured out my own sexuality and came out myself. But it was a strange thing. TV was always tricky for me.
Yeah.
I never understood it.
Yeah, I mean, like Boy George and like other music was huge for me, and I was always so curious about all of that. And when people started coming out as they got older, it was so much more comforting and less confusing. Learned so much from coworkers, children. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, depending on where you lived and who you what you grew up and sort of what people's values are, it could be really different. So influence was there, and then your impressions, and how do you understand your understanding of the community has changed or evolved through your life? That's what I'm really curious about. How has it evolved through life? I think it's right now is a really exciting time, and I wish we were able to celebrate Pride, because I think there's so many wonderful things that have come up in the last couple of years that would have so much more to celebrate. But
No, I think events like this are also like a huge cause for celebration. The fact that, agencies within the developmental services sector, but just everywhere, are sort of taking the impetus to go and educate staff and make sure that everyone's on the same page is like, it's a huge step forward. Oh, I forgot to say my pronouns are she and her. I know
And
Deanna.
my pronouns are he and him.
There you go.
Yeah.
We put in our names, but we sometimes put it in here. All right, so we'll just move on. Thank you for sharing, folks. So we'll move on to the next piece because we want to keep going, but
Okay. I can't read the first top one.
that's okay. Do you want us to read this here? So LGBTQ is an acronym meant to encompass. Can you read that?
Bi, transgender, queer, questioning.
Excellent. Yes. And so you can see in this PowerPoint that the acronyms are broken down, and then the umbrella of all of them.
The ones underneath, the big ones, I can't see.
Okay.
This is your Zoom eye exam.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you'll see these signs here in terms of the positive space. So if you go into stores or you see the triangle with the rainbow on there, it's basically just welcoming space.
It's very clear. There you go.
There you go. You got it. Wonderful.
And that's the queer LGBTQ umbrella, which binds everything together.
Perfect.
So for the purposes of this training, like we'll refer to the term queer to refer to the entire LGBTQ plus community, just for the sake of simplicity.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we get asked most about, I would say, and if you want to read this.
Two-spirit refers to a person who identifies as having both a masculine and a feminine spirit, and is used by some indigenous people to describe their sexual gender and or spiritual identity.
So I'm going to play a video for you folks today that explains what two-spirit refers to. It's something I think more people need to understand. Yeah. So I'm going to play it today. Just now, I'm just going to do a new share and bring it up for you.
I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. I'll take questions after if anybody has it.
It's also, I think, an appropriate video given that it's Indigenous History Month. So it's something important.
Absolutely. Everyone sees that?
Again, I'll take questions after.
Okay.
One more time. Though the label has only been used since the 90s, the concept of the two-spirit is something Indigenous groups have identified with for centuries. But what does two-spirit actually mean, and where does it come from? So what is two-spirit? It's an umbrella term that bridges Indigenous and Western understandings of gender and sexuality. You may recognize it as the two that sometimes appears on the end of LGBTQ2. There are many definitions and understandings of two-spirit, and each is nation-specific. The term was intentionally introduced by Native people with the goal of finding common ground and helping educate about traditional teachings in a contemporary context. The Two-Spirit Society of Denver offers the following definition. Two-Spirit refers to another gender role believed to be common among most, if not all, First Peoples of Turtle Island, North America, one that had a proper and accepted place within Native societies. This acceptance was rooted in the spiritual teachings that say all life is sacred. So how did the term Two-Spirit first come about? In 1990, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, at the 3rd Annual Native American Gay and Lesbian Gathering, the term Two-Spirit was proposed and affirmed by consensus. The word was a potential solution to what Native scholars and activists called the problem of naming, or making the many different sexual and gender identities that fall under the Two-Spirit umbrella legible across Native and non-Native cultures alike. For example, to illustrate the diversity of meanings that Two-Spirit contains, consider the following. In Lakota, the word winkte means to be as a woman and refers to two-souled Lakota people who transgress boundaries of gender from what may be considered male to female. In Dene, nadlehe means those who transform and refers to one of 4 separate genders: masculine-feminine, masculine-masculine, feminine masculine, and feminine feminine. Each gender has its own word in the Diné language. And those are just two nation-specific examples. There are so many more. Each nation's understanding of gender and sexual diversity is different and grounded in specific spiritual beliefs. Although all nations don't have a concept of two-spirit people, across those indigenous nations that do, two-spirit people were historically held in high regard and often considered sacred or divine, holding important positions like matchmakers, medicine people, or warriors on the front lines of battle. Many two-spirit people perform roles traditionally assigned to both men and women. Witwa, a famous two-spirit of the Zuni or Ihamana, was known to take part in masculine tribal matters and feminine tribal matters, and was even sent as an official Zuni delegate to Washington, D.C. Part of the reason Two-Spirit was adopted at the 1990 conference was because much of the written record on the indigenous nations of North America begins with European contact. For instance, the writings of Jesuit priests from the 1600s contain references to berdaches, which means kept boy in French, to refer to those who embodied both male and female genders. These writings often focus negatively on perceived cross-dressing among the Anishinaabe. The term is not only inaccurate in that it projects a European understanding of gender, but is widely considered pejorative by natives. Two-spirit was an attempt at self-determination across linguistic barriers, because the existing language, foreign and imposed violently on the indigenous peoples of North America, was both offensive and deeply colonial in its gaze. European colonizers imposed homophobia, rigid binary gender roles, and misogyny under the guise of civilizing indigenous people through the Christian tradition in residential schools and beyond. As a result, indigenous people were robbed not only of their land, but of their spiritual traditions and way of life regarding two-spirit people. Many nations came to forbid and punish two-spirit unions and self-expression. As recently as 2004, Kathy Reynolds and Dawn McKinley, two Cherokee women in Tulsa, Oklahoma, attempted to marry under tribal law, setting off a convoluted legal battle with serious political and social implications. The two were thrust into the spotlight against their wishes and became instant public symbols of the battle for two-spirit rights under tribal law. The Cherokee tribe is the second largest in the US. Although they were granted the right to marry, the decision to issue them a marriage license was soon challenged and led to a tribal law declaring that a union was to be between a man and a woman. Eventually, in 2016, the law was overturned. By that time, a wider cultural shift had taken place, both outside of and within the Cherokee Nation. In recent years, many Native people are returning to their two-spirit traditions as a way to heal from the injustices the American colonial project has visited upon their ancestors and traditions. In 2011, the first known U.S. two-spirit powwow was organized by the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits. Since then, powwows honoring two-spirits have been held in Montana and Kansas. And in March of 2017, the largest powwow in the U.S., the Gathering of Nations, honored two-spirit people during its grand entry. Two-spirit identity is resilient and precious. It has survived centuries of colonial violence and prejudice. These sacred ways of knowing live on amongst Native youth seeking to know more about themselves, elders who have kept the traditions alive in spite of the odds, and anyone in between. It should go without saying, but two-spirit is not a poetic way for non-Native LGBTQ people to express themselves. We're looking at you, Jason Mraz. It is, however, a sacred tradition among the first peoples of this land we call Turtle Island that all of its inhabitants should know about and respect.
The flag's 5 horizontal colored stripes represent the diversity of gender fluidity, gender fluid identity, and the gender fluid community. Gender fluid people may also identify as part of the non-binary community, transgender community, or as multigender. In 2018, Daniel Kusar designed the Progress flag as a symbol of the community, which features as a symbol for the community, which features black and brown stripes to represent people of color, and baby blue, pink, and white to include the trans flag in its design.
So I think it's just really important to note that Pride started with a riot. And it's a riot to fight for people's rights. And throughout our history, we've seen the changes that have gone on and the riots that have occurred. It is absolutely a celebration, and more colors should be added. And so this flag is just a representation of what it means for progress and exploring and building our symbols of community around Pride every month.
Also, the way I like to think about it is like it's almost like a working document, you know what I mean? And as our advocacy improves and as progress improves, more and more people who fall under the queer umbrella will be able to be identified and included in this movement, which is, as Deanna mentioned, something that came from a riot, right? So it's always going to be something that we're fighting for.
Yeah, so you'll see this flag, I think, change and evolve every year as our community does, and as we look for total inclusion, which is exciting. So 3 dimensions of sexual orientation.
Sexual identity, how you label your sexual orientation. Sexual behavior, what you do sexually with others. And sexual attraction, who you are attracted to.
So we want to explain today the 3 dimensions of sexual orientation. And for those of us who work with people who require a little extra support, or maybe have struggled with this yourself, it's really important to understand there are 3 dimensions and to have those conversations wholeheartedly. So this is called the gender unicorn. And quite simply, this is probably one of the best ways as a resource, or best ways to explain the differences between gender identity, expression, sex assigned at birth, physical attraction, emotional attraction. And what we want everyone to understand through this particular infographic is the difference between cisgender and transgender. And cisgender is the gender that you were assigned at birth, which corresponds with their sex. Transgender is people who have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from the sex assigned at birth. It is simple as that. So cisgender, transgender.
So
Go ahead, Michelle. Thank you.
no problem. This infographic does a really good job of sort of teasing apart the idea of sexual orientation from gender expression. And while all of this terminology and all of the nomenclature is falling under the same, queer umbrella, it's not to say that if you, for example, identify, or if you are a trans woman, you're not necessarily going to be straight, or you're not necessarily going to be gay. So there is so many permutations that come from these exact aspects. And there's this really great trans poet and advocate, and their name is Alok. And I mention this every time because I really love what they have to say about this particular thing, is that there are as many gender expressions as there are people living on this planet. So I think what they mean is that, everyone is like, everyone's a snowflake, but everyone is a snowflake, right? Like everyone has their own individual pattern and how they express themselves and what they feel. And so we can't really make any assumptions about people just because, they're either cis or trans, or because they identify as bisexual or gay or whatever the case may be.
Yes, and so if anyone comes to you and says, I want to explore my sexual identity, I'm not sure who I am, I'm not sure my feelings, this is a great infographic to use to walk people through and have a really meaningful discussion, and to break down the difference between, see the rainbow identity in your mind, your expression. You can see here the expression is the wholeheartedly the person. You have the hearts here that identify the icons here, which is a physical attraction, emotional attraction, and then the assignment, and breaking it down between the head, the heart, and the genitals, and then who you are as a person. It's a really important infographic, great infographic to celebrate. Gabe?
Just a question in the chat, asking what CIS stands for.
This is my favorite question to answer. So the terminology just comes from organic molecules or from molecules in nature. So when you have one molecule that's cis and one molecule that's trans, it means that they're the mirror images of one another. But like put your hands like this, right? So your right hand is exactly going to be like your left hand more or less. But when you put them on top of one another, they don't overlay. So it just means that there's slight differences between the two, but they are still mirror images. And so that's the meaning of cis. So cis is a person where your gender identity is the same as your internal biology, and trans is when your gender identity does not match your internal biology. That's all it is. It just comes from molecule naming. I knew that degree in science would be worthwhile. Gabe, do you want to go ahead with this slide? I know the writing is quite small.
Non-binary is an umbrella term that covers every gender identity outside the binary, man and woman. Non-binary people are every age, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, size, neurotype, disability, and expression. 3, not every non-binary person is genderless. Number 4, some genders under non-binary are gender fluid, gender queer, gender flux, big gender, pangender, polygender, demi-boy, demi-girl, autogender, gender, neutral, gray gender, mover, maverick, two-spirit, and feminist people. This one we call non-binary or queer.
With regard to all these, I see your note, Zoe, and you're 100% right. These are a lot of new words under that fourth bullet point. I will say this is just like a small smattering of it, because we know that, that people who are non-binary are woven into the fabric of most cultures around the world. And so, this is just a small sample. And I implore everyone after this session today to do that work and to try to do the research around what all these sorts of things mean, because it is keeping up to date is sort of our job as allies, and our job as advocates is to know what these things mean, so that when we have people that we know and love, and people that we work with, we're equipped to be allies and to be their support as best as we can. And I think this particular discussion around the trans community and around non-binary people is something that should be on the forefront of all these sorts of Pride events this year and moving forward, because this is a portion of the queer community that often gets lost and often and still subjugated. So it's something that we should all commit to do.
So this orientation, Michelle, I don't know, Gabe, can you read this? If not, we can get into it ourselves.
I got it.
Awesome.
Asexual, romantic, sexual, does not experience attraction towards anyone. Gray gender, romantic, sexual,
Rarely experiences.
rarely experiences attraction toward anyone. Demi, romantic, sexual, experiences attraction towards someone only after
Developing a strong bond.
a strong bond. Hold up a second.
I'll keep going. Heterosexual, experiences attraction towards genders other than their own.
You got it.
Homosexual, okay.
Experiences attraction toward the same gender as their own.
Bi,
Bisexual. experiences attraction towards the same gender as their own, as to other genders than their own.
Pan experiences attraction towards all genders regardless of gender. And poly.
Poly experiences attraction towards multiple, but not necessarily all genders.
So I would say this is a very basic list of orientations that if you have to walk away from this workshop, at least you know the basics here. And this is sort of the outline of the orientations.
And there's just something I want to point out here is the orientation in that middle column. It says romantic and sexual. So you don't necessarily, to identify, for example, as bisexual, you don't necessarily have to have a romantic attraction to a person of your own gender. It could just be a sexual attraction. And I think these are, again, like the small, more nuanced things that's usually missed in this sort of sex education where, to be a valid, and I use the terminology that people are using these days, but to be a valid pansexual doesn't mean that you have to be pansexual all the time and always looking like, even it's really according to that person and what their own identity is. So we're not really policing people in terms of what they choose to identify as.
And often the people we support are looking for language or trying to figure themselves out in terms of what the difference between romantic and sexual are. And this is a great way to kind of have that conversation and open up the conversation more. Some people really struggle and want to know more about who they are and what their feelings are and what's the difference. And this is a really great tool to use for those conversations.
It's sort of making the distinction between who do you love and who do you want to have sex with, and that could match, or they could be different people, and that's okay too.
So here's an sexual orientation. Here are the flags that you would probably see flying, especially now around Pride, of different groups of people that are represented in the orientation.
Bear.
Yeah, just read them out, just headings only. Sounds good, Gabe.
Gay bear. I can't see that one.
Androphilia.
Androphilia. Lesbian.
Lipstick lesbian.
Lipstick lesbian.
That one's hard too. Gynophilia. So that means
Gynophilia.
an attraction to all women or femme people.
Asexual.
Asexual. Demisexual. Demisexual.
Autosexual.
Autosexual, I knew that one.
Okay.
Bisexual. Pansexual. Nemoid or whatever.
Polysexual.
Polysexual.
Scoliosexual. And livesexual.
I got most of them.
I suspect folks probably learned there's way more than gay today. If you didn't know, this is a really great, again, a resource to use, sort of explaining the differences and then knowing the flags when you see them flying around during Pride or wanting to know what representation as well.
Honestly, the truth of the matter is a lot of these flags you'll only see during Pride Month. Yeah. The catch-all flag that Zoe has behind her and that Jason has behind him, those are usually the ones that you'll see, and that encompasses everyone.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the parade, you attend events, and Pride isn't about the parade. It's much more than that. It's a month long for a reason. And so you will learn more about the different communities and the flags, like you do here in the sexual orientation and why they're important. Self-expression. Gabe, can you read that?
Self-expression is the expression of your personality, feelings, or opinions, for example, art, acting, or dancing. Why is self-expression important? Because it allows people to
distinguish
themselves from others, to reflect how their own beliefs. and needs and validate their own self. Self-expression might be
One,
one, if not the most important to, ways for people to connect, navigate, and grow with each other. So is psychology today.
yeah, thank you. I think self-expression is something that we don't always think about, and we need to celebrate that more. And for for when we were having this discussion, Gabe and I, one of the things that we talked about is what do you feel is a great way to self-express? And I learned something new through Gabe. And I'm going to share this with you today. And this is something Gabe brought to me about what he loves about self-expression and how he celebrates.
Voguing.
Gabe, yep.
How is the LGBT community created? How the LGBT,
Community created voguing. What is Vogue?
Vogue or voguing is a highly stylized modern house dance originating in the late 1980s that evolved out of the Harlem ballroom scene of the 1960s. It gained mainstream exposure when it was featured in Madonna's song and video Vogue, and when showcased in the 1990 documentary Paris is Burning.
Any Drag Race fans, or RuPaul fans will recognize some of this stuff. Voguing, of course, is like a really popular thing to do in the drag community. Has anyone seen Paris is Burning? It's a great documentary. You should watch it. I think
I
it's on
have.
Crave. Yeah. What were your thoughts?
I loved it, and I really enjoyed the learning about the family system, and how, I mean, it was sad. I watched it so many years ago, so I'm trying to think back, but I think the circumstances of the folks that were featured in the movie were not the greatest, and but I thought it was so kind of like a demonstration of resiliency,
Absolutely.
and how people came together with whatever they had to just celebrate who they were, and I thought it was really great.
Thank you. Yeah, so the family system, of course, that Jennifer is referring to is, in the drag world, there are these houses, right? You have the house of Dior, the house of this, the house of that, and that's sort of, for people's chosen families. People come together. There's usually a drag mother, and she takes other people under her wing, and they become part of her house. And now this happens for people who are voguing too. So you don't necessarily have to be a drag queen or whatever, but as long as you're queer, you're in the house and you're included. Oh,
Yeah, so let's watch a video of it.
Yeah.
So you can see it firsthand. It's wonderful. Here we go.
I was inspired by voguing because voguing allows you to be anything and anyone you want to be.
Vogue is within the realm of a dance family. That's what it's supposed to be, a dance family.
The name voguing comes from Vogue magazine. The movements that define the dance are based on model poses from the fashion publication. Willie Ninja, who's called the godfather of voguing, also drew inspiration from martial arts, ballet, gymnastics, and even pantomimes. In the critically acclaimed documentary Paris is Burning, Ninja defines the dance as an extension of throwing shade. Instead of fighting, two people would settle their beef on the dance floor. So whoever had the best moves would be throwing the best shade. During the 1970s in Harlem, houses were formed within the larger drag ballroom scene. These houses serve as surrogate families, primarily for Black and Latino queer youth. Each house is led by a mother or father who also serve as guides to the ballroom community. House of LaVesia was the first to form in the late 70s. Other notable houses include the House of Extravaganza, Ninja, Pendavis, Corey, the House of Wong, the House of Dupree, and there are many others in New York and across the US. While many of the names came from the founders, other houses are named after designers like Chanel and Saint Laurent. Members come together to walk against one another in various categories at elaborate balls. Beyond the performance or throwing shade, These balls create a safe space for empowerment and belonging.
Whatever you carry with you, you leave it on that floor, you know? Whether it's suffering from illness, whether it's suffering from acceptance, whether it's suffering from not having a place to call your home, your house becomes your home.
After the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, when a large population of the ballroom community was hit hard, the legendary balls and the houses that organized them also became a place for activism and awareness. Younger generations of voguers can be seen taking the stage at smaller kiki balls hosted by the Gay Men's Health Crisis, an organization that advocates for the prevention of AIDS.
It all started at GMAC when GMAC was trying to figure out how to get young people to come into the building, and so kiki balls began so we could sort of attract them to come in for services.
These balls serve as an outlet for self-expression, activism, and offer a resource for gay and trans youth at risk of HIV, homelessness, abuse, and depression. Outside of ballroom culture, voguing has long been synonymous with fashion and glamour. It's often confused for Madonna's co-opted version of the dance form. But it means so much more to the community that made it.
Dance is the one thing that you can control with your body. That's something that's a being that comes from you. When you can take anything that comes from you and gives you a certain amount of being comfortable in your own skin, I think that's great, you know, and that is empowerment.
When you get up there, when you walk that ball and everyone's cheering for you in that moment, you feel like everybody sees you. It makes you feel like you're not alone.
Okay,
I'll take any questions if anybody has any questions.
they do. Well, I guess we'll keep on trucking, and if they do, Gabe will. For the interest of time, I know we're getting too excited and talking, but we're going to kind of go through the flags a little bit faster. But we just want you to know that there's a difference between, you know, sexual orientation, romantic attraction. Again, more flags broken down. We will share this PowerPoint with you. For those who are interested, reach out. I do have everyone's emails.
Life romantic.
Yeah, so we're going to go through this quickly, and then we're going to show some videos. But what do we want you to make a distinction of romantic attraction?
Romantic.
We're going to go into this another video called In a Heartbeat. A lot of times when we're talking to communities and we're supporting the people, is it's hard to really explain romantic attraction, or we talk a lot about what is attraction. And this is a beautiful video that can explain it really clearly, and we have really deep discussions about it. So we're very excited to share this with you now.
Also, get your tissue box handy because really you're going to cry. I mean, I do. So I assume you will too, obviously.
So what's so beautiful about In a Heartbeat is when people can articulate feelings, this video really expresses that. And that you're able to watch this video and then really have a really great conversation. And we talked about, again, the differences in that gender unicorn around feelings. And this video, I think, does a really beautiful job at expressing that. It's really important to have not only, a conversation and visuals, but also a video. It makes it much more impact. And I think that's a beautiful way of doing it. Gabe, do you want to read this? Gender expression.
Non-binary.
I can read this one. It's hard. An umbrella term for a person who identifies with or expresses a gender identity that is neither entirely male nor entirely female.
Androgynous. Identifying and or presenting as neither specifically masculine or feminine. Gender fluid. One who embraces fluidity of gender identity. Agender. One who does not identify as a particular gender. Gender nonconforming. One where physical or behavioral characteristics do not correspond to the traditional expectations of their gender. Genderqueer. One who does not identify with a single fixed gender.
Do you have anything to add?
I think just the importance. If you can't figure out the differences between all these things that fall under the umbrella, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up for it, but do the learning. And in the meantime, you're just using the term similar, like we use the word queer, just use the term non-binary. And I think you'll be good. And I think people will forgive you, and will give you time to learn.
Absolutely. Again, we're not going to get into going through all the flags, but we want to just sort of honor the gender identity flags as with the others. There are flags for all the gender identities, and you can take a look and look that up later and read through it, just so you're aware.
And as we know, gender is just a societal construct. And as such, we really don't, we can't predetermine what someone's going to act like or what their behavior is going to be or what they're going to dress like based on what they have between their legs. So that's my PSA, I think, for this whole section.
Gender pronouns sets the tone of allyship. Never assume a person's pronouns. Asking and correctly using someone's preferred pronoun is one of the most basic ways to show your respect for their gender identity. introduce yourself with your own pronoun. There's them, there, do not want to be his, they, them, then, they, him, her.
So the basic thing that we would say today that you come away with the PSA of Michelle and myself is, you see people and their pronouns within their signature on their emails, as you do, and what that means is that you're sharing allyship, and you want no one to make assumptions. And so moving forward, if you are able to start using your pronouns, it can be very powerful, and it just shows people that you are, being an ally. Very basic step that you can do
And
right
it
away.
creates the context for people who are non-binary to be able to share their pronouns, and that's really the most important thing that we can do is make people feel comfortable enough to be able to express themselves how they choose to express themselves or identify.
Absolutely. One of the fantastic tools that just came out and I've discovered in the last 2 months is called Genji, Gegi.ca. I love their icon. I'm here to help you advocate for your gender expression, gender identity. Basically, what this is a great search engine for Ontario students and teachers, whether gender, transgender, or cisgender, tools to advocate the right to express their gender in their own way, experiencing discrimination, harassment, or violence without being told they have to change. So what it does is it breaks down all the pieces it does all the research for you in terms of being able to recognize these areas and protect you. So if you are in the school system or you know people in the school system, this is a fantastic website. It just came out through the 519. So and it can be across the board too. It doesn't have to be school, but just sort of understanding the language is important. There's some fantastic resources. Encourage people to take a look. Another wonderful video. This speaks for itself. Love has no labels, and this one is also a tear jerker. One of my absolute favorites that I play at all my Train the Trainers. Again, I think it's about dialogue, it's about discussion, and it's just about people just celebrating each other. So I'm really happy to share this.
We have 1 minute left. For those of you who need to log off, don't worry about it. And we'll go 5 minutes.
You can reach out to it anytime.
Yeah. And we'll send out the slides and we'll send out the links to the videos.
Okay, sit back and enjoy.
heart doesn't see race.
Love has no age limit.
That's my best friend.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister.
Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
How else do you conclude a fantastic presentation in almost in 1 hour with that video? Thank you for the chat comments. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
able
guys.
to
I'll
attend
be
today.
for a bit to take
See, Ange, I
Yeah.
knew we would make you cry.
Oh, dear Lord. What a nice Friday morning.
I gotta go, everybody. It's been
Have a
Okay.
wonderful day, everyone. Happy Pride for those of you celebrating.
Yeah, we'll sit on for a few minutes. If you guys have questions, I will for sure, if Michelle can stay. Gabe, if you have to go, my friend, you can
can
go. Thank
stay.
you. Perfect.
Bye,
We
y'all.
encourage questions.
Bye, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, Gabe. Thanks so much for being the best co-presenter.
No problem. I'll do another one with you guys soon.
All right, buddy.
All right, peace.